There are moments in tennis when the score almost stops mattering. The crowd fades into the background, the rankings become irrelevant, and what you are really watching is a player fighting against himself. That is exactly what happened in Rome when Lorenzo Musetti collapsed into tears after surviving one of the toughest matches of his season. And honestly, if you only saw the final handshake, you would never understand what this match truly meant for him. Because this was not just another win at the Italian Open. This felt personal. For months ago, Musetti walked away from one of the biggest opportunities of his career completely devastated. At the Australian Open, he was pushing Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals and looked ready for the biggest breakthrough of his life. He had won the first set, controlled long stretches of the match, and suddenly the impossible started to feel real. Then his body gave up on him. The pain became too much, the movement disappeared, and the dream ended with tears instead of celebration. For a player who has spent years being labeled as one of the most naturally gifted talents on tour, moments like that hurt even more. Fans know Musetti can produce breathtaking tennis. The one-handed backhand, the touch shots, the creativity on clay, everything about his game screams superstar potential. But the biggest question surrounding him has always been whether his body can survive the physical demands of the modern game. That is why this match against Francisco Cerundolo carried so much emotion. Cerundolo is not the type of opponent that gives you rhythm or comfort. On clay, he is dangerous, aggressive, and physically relentless. He forces long rallies, constantly attacks angles, and makes every service game feel like a marathon. Musetti knew before stepping onto court that this would not be quick or easy. And from the very beginning, you could see the discomfort on his face. After the match, Musetti admitted he had been suffering almost immediately. He revealed that cramps started hitting him during the battle and that he was far from fully fit. But what made the performance so fascinating was the way he refused to mentally collapse. Earlier in his career, matches like this often slipped away once the physical issues appeared. This time, he stayed locked in. The first set alone felt like a psychological war. Both players produced moments of brilliance mixed with patches of frustration. Cerundolo kept hammering heavy forehands into the corners while Musetti relied on variety and movement to survive the exchanges. Every game seemed to swing emotionally. 1 minute the Italian crowd exploded with excitement, and the next they sat in silence after an unforced error. Then came the tiebreak. And honestly, that may have been the turning point of Musetti's entire tournament. There was pressure from everywhere. The home crowd desperately wanted their Italian star to advance. Musetti himself knew how important this tournament is for his confidence. Losing another big clay court match while physically struggling could have reopened all the doubts from earlier this season. But instead of fading, he played some of his bravest tennis of the year. He trusted his shot making under pressure. He absorbed Cerundolo's pace. And when the crucial moments arrived, Musetti simply held his nerve better. Winning that opening set changed the atmosphere completely. Suddenly, you could feel belief returning to him. The body was still hurting, but mentally he looked stronger. That is a huge difference. Tennis players often talk about how physical pain becomes easier to manage once momentum shifts in your favor. Musetti looked like he was feeding off the crowd, the adrenaline, and the possibility of redemption. Still, the second set was far from comfortable. Cerundolo kept pushing him physically, extending rallies and testing his movement. There were moments when Musetti looked close to breaking down again. Between points, he appeared exhausted. At times, he walked slowly toward the baseline, clearly trying to manage the cramps building in his legs. Yet somehow, he kept producing spectacular shot-making at the exact moments he needed it most. That balance between beauty and suffering is what makes Musetti such a fascinating player to watch. Not many players on tour can create magic while visibly struggling. Even when injured or exhausted, Musetti still finds angles that seem impossible. One point he is slicing defensively from 3 meters behind the baseline, and the next he is feathering a perfect drop shot that leaves the crowd roaring. It is chaotic, emotional tennis. And in Rome, the crowd absolutely loved every second of it. When he finally closed out the match, the emotion instantly poured out of him. The tears were not just about beating Cerundolo. They represented months of frustration, pain, and uncertainty finally being released. Imagine carrying the memory of those Australian Open tears for 4 straight months. Imagine constantly hearing questions about your fitness, your consistency, and whether you can physically survive the biggest matches. Then imagine fighting through cramps in front of your home fans and finally coming out victorious. That is why this win mattered so much. Afterward, Musetti spoke honestly about his physical condition, and his comments were revealing. He admitted he is still not 100% physically. He even explained that he had problems in the days leading up to the tournament and had to reduce his training intensity. According to him, he has been playing with protective bandaging just to manage the situation. That is concerning for Italian fans because the deeper you go in Rome, the tougher the physical demands become. And now comes perhaps his biggest challenge yet, Casper Ruud. If there is one player you do not want to face while dealing with cramps or lingering physical pain, it might be Ruud. The Norwegian is one of the toughest clay court competitors in the world. He thrives in long rallies, rarely gives away free points, and forces opponents to work for absolutely everything. Against Ruud, there are no shortcuts. That matchup could reveal a lot about where Musetti truly stands physically. The good news for the Italian is that his confidence appears to be returning at the perfect time. Earlier this clay season, his form looked shaky. He suffered disappointing losses and struggled to build momentum after missing tournaments due to injuries. There were real concerns that he might slide out of the top 10 completely. But Rome feels different. There is something powerful about playing at home, especially for Italian players at the Foro Italico. The energy becomes emotional, almost overwhelming at times. Every winner feels louder. Every comeback feels bigger. And for Musetti, who openly admitted he could hear his family and close friends screaming from the stands, that support clearly means everything. You could actually see it affecting him emotionally throughout the match. Whenever he won a huge point, he would glance toward his player box. Whenever he struggled physically, the crowd tried to lift him back up. That connection between player and fans created an atmosphere that felt bigger than a third-round match. And maybe that is why this tournament suddenly feels so important for his career trajectory. For years, Italian tennis fans have searched for a homegrown champion in Rome. The last Italian man to win the tournament was Adriano Panatta back in 1976. Think about that for a second. Nearly 5 decades have passed without an Italian lifting the trophy in front of the home crowd. That pressure alone can crush players emotionally. Yet Musetti seems to be embracing it instead of hiding from it. Of course, the concerns remain real. Physical durability has become the central storyline of his career. The talent has never been questioned. Nobody doubts his shot-making ability or creativity on clay. But tennis at the elite level is brutal physically, especially in long tournaments where recovery becomes just as important as skill. Musetti himself admitted he is still trying to understand how much of the struggle is psychological versus physical. That comment may have been the most interesting thing he said all week. Because once injuries start happening repeatedly, athletes often begin carrying fear with them onto the court. Every tight muscle feels dangerous. Every moment of fatigue creates panic. Overcoming that mental barrier can be just as difficult as healing physically. That is why this emotional victory could become a turning point. Not because it guarantees a title run. Not because it suddenly solves every injury problem. But because it showed something different in Musetti mentally. Instead of breaking down when the cramps arrived, he adapted. Instead of feeling sorry for himself, he fought through it. That resilience matters. Now the tennis world waits to see what happens next. Can Musetti recover physically in time for the battle against Ruud? Can he continue surviving these brutal clay court matches? And most importantly, can he finally turn all that incredible talent into a historic run in front of his home fans? Right now, nobody truly knows the answer. But one thing is clear after Rome. Lorenzo Musetti is no longer just trying to entertain people with beautiful tennis. He is trying to prove he can suffer, survive, and win when everything hurts. And sometimes those are the victories that define a career far more than the trophies themselves. So what do you think? Can Musetti overcome the physical struggles and make a deep run at the Italian Open? Or will the demanding clay court battles eventually catch up to him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more daily tennis updates right here on Tennis Desk.